This video demonstration is going to walk you through how to think about having multiple variables, multiple storage, multiple inputs. So let's take a look at what we are going to be doing. Alberta Einstein teaches a business class at Podunk University. To evaluate the students in this class, she has given 3 tests. It is now the end of the semester, and Alberta asks you to create a program that inputs each student's test scores and outputs the average score for each student and the overall class average. Hint: the outer loop should allow for Mrs. Einstein to input all the students one by one, as many as she wants, and the inner loop should accept the 3 exam scores and compute the average for each student. So as you can see, there's an outer loop and the inner loop, okay? As you can probably guess it, the outer loop counts how many students she's inputting and stores them in a variable. The inner loop takes all the 3 exam scores that she's inputting and then computes the average for each student. Then the last compute that they have is the overall class average. So each score needs to be saved in some sort of variable for each student. So when we're looking at what our variables are, we can get hints based on what type of program has been asked of us to create. So one of the variables that you may not readily think about when you're looking at this problem is that she has a choice whether she can enter or not enter any more students. So if she doesn't want to enter more students, she would say like no, or N for no, Y for yes, but she has to be able to have a choice to enter more or be done entering them into the program. So that's a variable that we need to think about. Choice is 1. We need to do a student count, of course, because we need to count as we're adding students in. We're going to do a class sum, a student average, and a student ID. And what the student ID variable is going to do is it's going to store that student's individual test scores. So then later on, when we compute the overall class average, then we have that variable stored for each one. So the student ID is going to be created for each student. So like student 1 is student 1, student 2, etc. The program's automatically going to create that variable to store that in for that particular student to compute that class average later on. So let's take a look and see how this runs in Raptor. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play. I always watch either the master console or this panel right here. So as we're watching, we're going to say yes because we want to enter a new student record. Now I'm going to start to be able to put in my student scores. So I have this student, so that's score 1, score 2, score 3. Okay, now it should be asking me, do I want to enter more students? Because I've already gone through my 3. So it's going to do all my calculations, it's going to come back, and it's going to ask me if I want more. And I'm going to say yes. So now we're going to go into this loop where it's going to count because I want to enter 3, right? So that's where this count is coming into. It has to count the number of times or number of exams that I'm entering, which is 3. So that's why it says, and you can see it, count would be greater than 3. If it's not, it goes back through. If it is, it comes down, stores in the variable, does the calculation, it puts out the variable, and if I say, no, I'm done, it then goes into my bottom select, and it says my flowchart's complete. So see how it says the average for student 1, that's why we need to have that student ID, is 60. The average for student 2 is 56. and the class average is 58. So it would have as many as what I want to enter. So down here, once I'm done entering, so let's start back up here actually. I'm setting my score, I'm setting my count, I'm setting my student sum. I then go into my loop and I say, if my count is less than 3, I need to get those numbers. My count goes up by 1. I get stored in the student sum is the score. Then it comes back around. It loops back down. I'm going to do this 2 more times. Okay. Now it's done. So it comes in and it says student ID plus 1. So that's where we got the one student, student ID 1 or student 1. Then it calculates the average. So it's student sum divided by 3. It puts the average for student plus student ID, so that's where it's counting that from, is the student average. Then it goes back up into the loop. Actually, it goes back up into this top loop. And it starts again. So student count plus 1, class average, class sum plus student average. Then if I say, yes, I want to enter another one, I go back down through this. My count is counting the tests. My student ID then becomes 2 because I'm entering my second person. When all said, all done, I select no. I come back down here. Now I have student count equals 1 or student sum equals 0. If yes, then no student data was entered. If no, I'm going to do the class average, class sum divided by student count minus 1. I'm going to put the average and I'm going to end it, and that's what my outputs were. So there are some variables that maybe you didn't really think about because they're different. So like giving somebody the choice, we have to be able to store that somewhere, the yes versus no. So that's why there is a variable. Being able to store each student individually. That's why there's this variable. Think about when we had that program with Jasmine and Shannon, and they were doing the bowling. We only had 2 there. This is an unknown now because I can enter as many as I want. So I need to have some sort of variable that's going to store that information. And then I'm going to go through the loop. So that's why there's 2 loops. First is the loop of students. Second is the loop of the tests. And this is how to input information, do the counts as many times as needed.